Hi everyone again. Today I'm gonna show the main results, observations and conclusions of the study conducted by Baker and Buskirk in 1965 in the town of Nuñoa at 4,000 meter elevations. This study aimed to analyze the thermoregulatory response to 2 hours cold exposures in high altitude natives, residents from Nuñoa, and Caucasians who were coming from the state of Pennsylvania in the United States. I hope you enjoy it. An important aspect to consider before starting to talk about the results is that there were two assessment protocols for exposure test within 24 hours of each one. And they did not observe differences in the American group between the first and the second assessment. However, the results showed significant differences or significant lower rectal temperatures between the second exposure in the high altitude natives groups. Another aspect that we have to highlight is that the assessment was not a continuous assessment. They made recordings every 4 minutes. So, besides they observed higher rectal temperature in the high altitude natives compared to the Americans, the authors conclude that if this assessment protocol would have been continuous instead of recordings every 4 minutes, or it would have taken longer than 120 minutes, these differences could not have existed between groups. Another variable that it was studied was the skin temperature during the cold exposure. As I have previously mentioned it in the last issues, there were different parts of the body skin temperature assessment, as the forehead, chest, upper arm, finger, thick, calf, and toe. Then, with an equation that gives different weights to each skin temperature of the different mentioned parts or body parts, they estimate the mean weighted skin temperature. This was through the entire 2 hours assessment higher in the high altitude natives compared to the Americans. However, if we analyze several skin temperatures of different parts of the body, they observed that, for instance, forehead and trunk skin temperatures were not significantly higher in the high altitude natives groups, different from, for instance, finger and two skin temperatures that were significantly higher in the inhabitants from Nuñoa compared to the Americans. Another aspect that the authors mention is that, as I told you in the methods issue, the participants entered first to a room where they stay naked under ambient temperature, because they wanted that both groups reach a thermal equilibrium, or the same skin and rectal temperature. However, they did not get that. In both pre-exposure and during the cold exposure, the high altitude natives saw a higher mean skin temperature. Regarding to skin temperature, the North American group of participants saw a descent just above 1 degree over the ambient temperature of the room after 18 minutes of cold exposure. In contrast, the group of high altitude natives saw a higher temperature. To be exact, that was 3.5 Celsius degrees over the ambient room temperature. If we observe the data individual by individual, the tools of a large number of high altitude residents cooled relatively slowly compared to the American participant tools. Another aspect that we have to highlight is that the finger skin temperature response was about the same than the two skin temperature. In this regard, and I'm going to read that, and the authors highlight that after 420 minutes of exposure, the average finger temperatures of the Caucasians were respectively 20.2 degrees and 12.8 degrees, while those of the high altitude residents were 23.8 degrees and 14.4 Celsius degrees. The body surface area was bigger in the Andean group compared to the North American group. So, the oxygen consumption relative to the body surface area was bigger in the Andean group from the beginning of the cold exposure until the 40 minutes of protocol. From the 40 minutes to the 68 minutes, there were no differences between groups, and afterwards, from the 68 minutes to the end of the protocol, the North American participants showed a higher oxygen consumption relative to the body surface area. I'm going to talk to you now about three concepts that can be read in a table in the article and that I will show you afterwards. The first one is the heat production. The heat production in the first 60 minutes, was 12% bigger in the group of Andeans. In the second half of the experiment was about the same in both groups. But if we analyze this concept through the entire or total time of the protocol, it was a 6% higher in the group of Andeans. Then the heat loss. In the first 60 minutes, the heat loss was about the same in both groups. However, there was a huge difference observed in the second half of the experiment. In fact, the group of Andeans reported a 62% higher heat loss relative to the North American group. Then, analyzing this concept through the entire protocol, we observe a 60% higher heat loss in the group of Andeans compared to the Americans. The last concept is the total heat exchange. The total heat exchange can be estimated as the sum of the heat loss plus the heat production. And in the first minutes of experiments, the total heat exchange was at 5% higher in the Andeans compared to the Americans. In the second 60 minutes of experiment, it was a 12% higher in the Andeans. And if we analyze this by the total time of the protocol, we observe a 8% higher total heat exchange in the Andeans compared to the North Americans. So what were the main conclusions of the authors? The first one is the mean weighted skin temperatures of the high altitude natives groups was higher compared to the Americans, especially if we observe or analyze the skin temperature from finger and toes. That was significantly higher in the group of Andeans. Interestingly, the heat loss of the finger and toes of the Andeans were higher than the heat loss of this part of the body in the Americans. We do not, or the observed differences in the rectal temperatures between both groups, and I have to remind you that it was higher in the Andeans than in the Americans. This difference would have been abolished if the protocol would have taken longer or with a continuous recording, not every 4 minutes interval. The next conclusion is the oxygen consumption relative to the body surface area, that it was higher in the Americans. So that oxygen consumption relative to body surface area was higher in the first 40 minutes of the protocol in the Andeans. From the 40 to the 68 minutes, there were no differences, and from the 68 minutes to the end of the protocol was higher in the American, maybe as a mechanism to compensate the higher skin temperature and rectal temperature lost in the Americans compared to the Andeans. So, all in all, I hope you have liked this synthesis of this study conducted in 1965, and I hope to bring you some new studies analyzed in the upcoming weeks, and bringing you some new interesting point of views that we can join in the video series of the Altitude Collection Infographics channel. So I hope your comments and I hope you like the channel, and see you soon.